You ready, Erica? Start recording. Are we already recording? Okay, then I will start the script to remotely conducting open meetings. Everybody bear with me. This open meeting law, the select board is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation. Unless such participation is required by law, this meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the select board is convening by video conference via Zoom webinar as posted on the town's website identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Now we're going to go into the confirmation of member access. We'll start with select board members. Please state to identify that you're here and you can hear me. Melissa Murphy.
Present.
Christy Tarantella.
Here.
Matt Fee.
Here.
Don Hill Holgate. You here, Don?
Yeah.
Oh, there you are. Sorry. A lot of boxes. Thank you. And then we'll go to staff. Erica Mooney.
Present.
Let's see. I'm looking. Brian Turbot.
Present.
Amanda Perry.
Present.
Paul Barad.
Present.
Hey, Paul. Welcome. Greg Tibnan.
Present.
Let's see. Mark Willett.
Present.
And did I see Charlie? Yeah, Charlie Pollock. Hey, Charlie.
Present.
Welcome. And then from the school tonight, we have the campus-wide committee. I see Tom Hamlin. Can you hear me, Tom?
Present. Yep.
There. And so from Weston Sampson, Maria Rudiman.
Hi, Marie. Yep.
Maria, please correct me if I get anybody's name wrong. Beth Hallett, superintendent. Hi, Beth.
Hi, present.
Diane O'Neill.
Hi, present. Thank you.
Dave Fredericks from the committee. Dave's looking for the mute button. He's there though. Dick Webb from
I'm present.
Hey, Dave.
Hi. Good evening, Jason. Yes, thank you.
Steve LaRosa from Weston Sampson.
Yes, present. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, George Kelly, Nick Nash from Sandbar. They're also on tonight. You guys hear me?
Yep, I'm here.
Hey, George.
Hi.
Yes, I can hear you, Jason.
Hey, Nick. All right. I think that is everyone. If I missed anybody, Erica will let me know. I'll finish up this.
Town manager's here.
What's that?
The town manager's here.
Oh, Libby. Sorry, I didn't see you, Libby. Libby is here. We are using Zoom webinar for meetings, which allows for the public to participate in the meeting as an attendee. The registration link can be found in the description of the Nantucket Government TV YouTube live feed on the meeting. Let's see. All supporting materials that have been provided to the members of this body are available on the town's website. Unless otherwise noted, the public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless noted otherwise. A couple housekeeping things. We always ask everybody to turn off their video if they're not talking, if it's not their agenda item. Just allows us to be able to see hands and stuff going up. And please mute if you can, just so your dog's not barking in the background. Let's see. Please state your name before speaking. Usually I'll call on you too, so sometimes it doesn't happen. And finally, each vote taken in the meeting tonight will be conducted by a roll call vote. Okay. We will open the select board meeting for February 9th, 2022. No changes to the agenda that I know of. Announcements, Libby?
We really only have that this meeting is being video and audio recorded and select board announcements or comments.
Any comments or announcements from the select board at the beginning of the meeting? I just had a couple. One is the BioBot test came in today. It is 1 to 5 positives per day. So we went from 95 to 50 to, I think, was it 10 or 15? Now we're down to 1 to 5. So that's really good news. And we don't have a COVID update tonight, so I wanted to share the good news. And also, I got a lot of questions tonight on during the campus-wide master plan should people talk during public comment? Should they talk during the agenda? And I got to a couple people say just to raise your hand, raise your digital hand if you're an attendee during the agenda item. During public comment is for anything that's not on the agenda. So I just wanted to say that. So tonight, the school will be giving us an update on the project, on the campus-wide, the master plan. And I will take some public comment, but I want to be careful and just kind of just set it ahead of time. We don't have time tonight to do, 25 hands go up. I won't be able to get to everyone. I just wanted to say that in the beginning, but there will be more opportunities, I think, for the community to talk about this subject matter, but we can get into that more during that agenda item. Anything else from the board one last time? Okay, there's no follow-up on comment.
Did I miss it? Did you welcome Christy back?
There you go, Matt. Go ahead.
Welcome back, Christy.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Christy. Into public comment. Is there any comment tonight that's not on our agenda? Please raise your digital hand. Okay, seeing none, we'll go to approval of minutes for February 2nd, payroll warrants and treasury warrants.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call, Melissa,
Aye.
Christy,
Aye.
Dawn,
Aye.
Matt,
Aye.
Jason, aye. That passes unanimously. Citizen Department request resignation of planning board alternate.
Should we make a motion to accept the resignation, send a letter of thanks for his service, and advertise the position?
Yes, I think that's, yep. Is that correct, Erica?
I was just why don't you go on with the motion and then maybe I'll give you some information.
Okay. All right. So did you second that, Melissa?
Yes, I did.
All those in favor, Melissa,
Aye.
Christy,
Aye.
Dawn,
Aye.
Matt?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all. That passed unanimously. Erica?
I just wanted to point out that in your packet, I'm not sure if anybody got a chance to look at it, but there is a timeline that I put in for the planning board alternate-C. We have already listed it on the town's website. It'll be in the paper starting this week and next. We'll add just the seat that's available on the select board's agendas. The 25th at noon is the deadline for submitting the applications, and then we'll put them in the board's packet, and so that the public can see the applications, and then you're going to be scheduled to have the applicants review their applications and make the appointment on March 23rd. And there's a little bit of a gap there only because we are not meeting on March 2nd because that's school vacation week.
Thank you, Erica. Okay, town managers report. We're starting with the Nantucket Public Schools update on campus-wide master plan.
Mr. Chair, I would just turn it over to the school. I'm not sure, is Dr. Hallett going to start it
Yep.
out?
I'm here and I apologize, I was muted, so speaking without my microphone on. Thank you and good evening. So we have an update for you on the Nantucket Public Schools master campus-wide master plan. Excuse me. I am happy to drive the bus if you want, Erica. Otherwise, you are welcome to. With regard to the presentation, it's up to you. So
if everybody can see it, so I'm happy to just scroll through it.
sure, you can go right through to the next one. Thank you. So we have an extensive campus-wide master plan today, committee, and today we wanted to just share with you some updates since the last time we met with you on the entire plan, because it is important to remember that although there's been some discussion around athletic, the synthetic turf fields that are part of this proposal, there is a larger plan and there are lots of pieces to it. We just want to make sure we're updating you on all parts of that plan. So as you can see, these are our committee members, and there are some of them here today to share with you. And I'm very thankful to have Dick Webb from SMRT, Marie Rudiman from Weston and Sampson, Steve LaRosa, also from Weston and Sampson. Tom Hanlon is here with us, and also Dave Fredericks and Diane O'Neill. And please forgive me if I forgot anybody. So thank you very much. If you can go ahead, Erica, next one. And I'm going to turn this over to Dick Webb, who's going to bring us through.
Thank you, Dr. Hallett. Again, you all, and good evening, board members. You've seen this slide before. There really has been no change to the basic design and layout of the overall campus master plan. But again, as Dr. Hallett mentioned, just want to highlight some of the improvements. Again, there's been much focus on the proposed surfacing selection for 2 of the athletic fields, but there's an awful lot of other information and effort that is going into the definition of this master plan. The master plan identifies the optimum location for our new 400-meter running track facility. It identifies the optimum location for a new school, should a new school ever be needed on campus. The best location for improving campus parking capacities, addressing faculty housing needs. Again, the reminder that we have, the town of Nantucket, are in a very unique position where the community has one 45-acre campus that includes all schools. That's a very unique sort of situation, one that we feel is very positive for the school system, but at the same time warrants a very careful planning process to make sure that every square foot is appropriately planned. So if I could have the next slide, please, Erica. This graphic just shows a couple points. The blue zone in the middle of this slide represents the years 2010 to 2018. And that is that period where we had the enrollment spike that we're so familiar with at 2010, with a total student enrollment of 1,233, moving up to that 1,627 number in 2018. It's during that period that we successfully built the intermediate school in response to this enrollment spike. But more importantly, as we talk about the campus certainly some of the athletics, there have been no improvements to the outdoor athletic facilities since 2008, before this spike even developed. So that is a key understanding that we have as we address the athletic needs of the overall campus. If I could have the next slide, please, Erica. Again, just a graphic. The last field, the Bacchus Lane fields were built 14 years ago in 2008. Since then, this is a list of some of the athletic program growth that has happened on campus. Some of them certainly is not outdoor athletic, but some of it is. And the point is, we have a very robust athletic program, one of the a 72% athletic participation rate, which is much higher than the state average, and it's something that I think the community should be very proud of. I think a key component, or one of the factors that allows this participation rate to be so high, is the fact that the athletic facilities are right on campus. So students do not have to finish school, get in the car, drive, change, go somewhere, arrange for transportation to go to an off-site location. So I think one of the keys to this high participation rate is the fact that the facilities are all located currently on the existing campus. And again, as we talk about the growth in athletics, with the construction of a code compliant or 400-meter National Federation track, the anticipation is to again establish a boys and girls track and field program as well. Next slide, please, Erica. Just some images of our existing fields, and I'm certainly not going to go through all of the text of the program needs, but again, this participation rate coupled with the spike in overall enrollment, coupled with the fact that we haven't built any fields in 14 years, have just put a tremendous pressure on the existing natural grass fields. And actually, I want to, at this point, Tom Hanlon, if you have any comments that you want to add to that, we do have a slide a little later on as well that you can talk a little bit about natural grass, but didn't know if you wanted to comment here.
Yes, so I just wanted to make a couple of comments. You know, as Dick said, at this rate, we're at about 72% of overall NHS participation. And at these rates, the rates are exceeding state averages. The recommended hours for a level 4 grass field is about 800 hours. And we're currently at a conservative rate, we're at about 1,100 hours, and it's rising with the increased enrollment. Additionally, if and when we build another school soccer or build another school, then we're going to have to shift the soccer field over and use the grandstand to accommodate that new school. So another reason why we want to, you know, build the turf on the grandstand. We spend about $40,000 a year on resodding and repairing the soccer field and the football field currently. And obviously, as the years goes on, those costs will increase. We have we also have a desperate need for parking, and with the new stadium, we're going to have like about 62 extra parking spaces, which I think is really important. I think everybody knows that, you know, that school fills up really fast, and those parking spots are really important. We are the last remaining school that has a cinder track in Massachusetts, and that's not up to code. And with the new track, this will allow for more participation, especially for students that don't want to be or don't like to be in contact or team sports. This allows those students to access another avenue to be an athlete or to be able to get out. And we all know getting out in and, you know, some exercise is always good for the kids, and it allows for these kids to have that participation or the opportunity to participate in the track and field. And then finally, the grandstand we currently have is not up to our current mass building accessibility codes. The new grandstand will. So I think that these are more, you know, important points to know. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Erica, could we have the next slide, please? And again, this graphic, I think you're all familiar with, but we have, this master plan has been a process. We have successfully completed 8 phases of the master plan. We are currently now at phase 9, and there are remaining phases. Again, as we allude to new schools, faculty housing, and other support facilities, there are other phases identified. The exact order, we don't know the order. And I think that's an important consideration or important reason for having a master plan, is you're not quite sure of the order of the need, but you have an area dedicated for it. Next slide, please, Erica. Again, athletic fields have been a key component of the overall master planning effort. The master plan at this point does propose 2 synthetic turf fields, the 2 fields in dark green immediately behind the high school. But it is important to note there are 6 other fields on campus by the elementary school and over at Bacchus Lane, and the proposed Bacchus Lane baseball field. Those other 6 fields are not proposed as synthetic turf. They are proposed as natural grass. We feel the synthetic turf is the appropriate surfacing solution for the 2 fields behind the high school, but we're certainly, we feel the natural grass fields are appropriate in the other locations. Next slide, please, Erica. Just a little bit about natural grass. Tom alluded to the kind of that targeted 800 hours per use on a natural grass field, but I want to caution you all, there's a tremendous number of variables that work into what a specific field can successfully carry without deteriorating and ruining the field. And some of the biggest ones are the types of sport. It's generally understood or accepted that football and lacrosse are two of the most intensive sports in terms of wear on a natural grass field. The season of play is important. This time of year, and I was just walking the fields yesterday, the fields are the ground moisture is high. The new grass hasn't really germinated yet that was overseeded in the fall. Fields are very vulnerable. So spring sports, particularly lacrosse, can have a very significant impact on the viability of natural grass fields. And also most important is athlete size and numbers. If you can imagine a kindergarten class on a field for 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, versus a football or lacrosse team on that same field for 3 hours, 5 days a week, dramatically different impacts to the natural grass field. So the point is just there's a lot of factors that we work with assessing the carrying capacity, and essentially it determines the Sports Turf Managers Association have an assessment, a couple of assessment tools. One is called a playing condition index, which is, again, they are addressing many of these sorts of these issues as they assess each field's playing capacity. Next slide, please, Erica. And as they assess the playing capacity, they generally break field conditions down into 5 levels. Level 1 is the top of the line level that you will see at professional ballparks, Division I colleges, that sort of thing. Level 5 is really essentially fields that are deteriorated to such a degree that I won't say they're unplayable, but they present significant bad conditions from a playing perspective. As we look at that level 1 through level 5 assessment, we are in these high school fields are essentially a level 4. They're exhibiting significant amount of bare area, weed growth. Even though they are irrigated and they are fertilized, the intensity of play is preventing them from rising to a higher level. And Tom, I don't know if you're the one who does a lot of the summer maintenance on the fields, and didn't know if you wanted to add anything to this.
Yeah, sure. Like the current field conditions are a level 4, I believe, and at that level, with our over participation, we cannot maintain these fields in a safe manner. Last year, the MIAA wouldn't allow us to play a playoff game because they deemed the fields too dangerous. With maintaining these grass fields, we're using about 2 tons of fertilizer, grub control, and weed control, and about 100,000 gallons of water every year, not to mention the labor that's put in to maintain these fields. If we were to stay with grass between the construction and then the amount of time to establish that grass, we're talking about 2 years for it to be ready to play. Now, with that becomes a logistical problem that we have thought about long and hard. If we can't play in those fields, then we're going to have to try and find somewhere else to play those games or play those practices, which will mean that kids will have to be picked up by parents and go off campus to those fields to be able to play those practices, which we know can be a logistical nightmare for parents. Another part of this turf field, it will be safer for our students because of the retention pad that we have underneath the grass, and the brock fill, that's the infill, which is 100% organic. It will allow us to have a decrease in injuries and certainly concussions. And you got to remember, when topsoil gets hard in the winter and the temperature drops in the topsoil, that topsoil becomes really, really hard. And that's something that I think that needs to be, it's something that we certainly talked about and considered. And then Finally, I know that there's a very vibrant and important debate about the PFAS in the turf. I think it's important for the community to talk about this and continue to talk about it. But what I've been told in layman's terms is basically there's more PFAS currently in the topsoil than there is in the turf. And that topsoil, even if we clean it and brought it back, would still have it because it comes naturally from rain and snow, and it falls on that topsoil. And of course, the topsoil has a slower drainage rate. So those PFAS are sitting there with a possibility of getting on our students' skin or inhaling them, where the turf has a better drainage system to allow those particles not to be in direct contact with our athletes. And I think that's an important part to talk about. And that's kind of all I have right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Erica, next slide, please. Again, we wanted to talk about the overall master plan and the improvements. Again, certainly one of the flagship components of the project is a new synthetically surfaced 400-meter track. And inboard of that track is a dimensionally, excuse me, a multi-purpose field that can support all sports, football, soccer, lacrosse, and field hockey. We are dramatically improving the quality of the lighting. The lighting will be replaced. It'll give us better uniformity. Translation, we won't get dark spots in the corners of end zones and that sort of consideration. But more important, just as important, dramatic improvements in controlling spill and glare characteristics for the light. So the poles will be higher than they are. The current pole lighting system is now, so that lighting can be much more effectively aimed on the field and not across into adjacent neighborhoods. Next slide, please. The second field behind the high school, again, will have a multi-purpose capability, primarily to be supporting field hockey and lacrosse. And again, this would be the field that is located closer to Sparks Avenue. Next slide, Erica. And then lastly, moving to the southern portion of the campus, the construction of a new natural grass baseball field with the optimum baseball orientation, and also the situation where we don't have right now the conflict between foul balls and our windshields. But also more importantly, as we talk about developing the campus and the athletic improvements for the athletes, bringing tennis back onto campus with the construction of 5 tennis courts that again would support the high school program, but certainly support community use when it's not programmed or needed to be programmed by the high school. We alluded to, or again, I'd like to at this point as you all I know are very familiar, that we had a workshop with the school board last night focusing on the PFAS issues. And at this point, I'd like to go to the next slide and introduce Steve and Marie to talk just very briefly on some of the PFAS components.
Hello, I'm Marie Rudiman from Weston and Sampson. I'm a risk assessor and human health risk assessor and toxicologist. I'm sure you might be familiar with the Tetra Tech study that was funded by Martha's Vineyard. I'm going to go over the results of that study. So in the Martha's Vineyard study, they studied the same synthetic turf system that's proposed for Nantucket, and they tested all components of that field of the synthetic turf, the grass, the glue, shock pad, and infill, and they analyzed it by several different methods, solvent extraction, synthetic rainwater, and an aggressive oxidation, which is essentially putting it in a very high pH base and under extreme heat. And the Tetra Tech conclusions, and the two things that we're really worried about here with potential exposures to PFAS are, is it going to cause a direct contact exposure that is significant? And will it leach into the aquifer? So for Tetra Tech's conclusions that in direct contact exposure, they indicated that there was no significant risk from the PFAS-6 that can be identified based on the available data and the regulatory standards, and that direct contact exposure to materials in and from the synthetic turf materials are de minimis, which means it's so low that you can't calculate it. And that was not just for PFAS, that was also for other metals and semi-volatile organic compounds that they also analyzed for. And then the second thing that we're worried about is the potential for leaching into the groundwater. And they found that the concentrations that they found from SPLP, which is the synthetic rainwater, it's actually lower pH. It's more acidic than typical rainwater that we have in New England. It's more like 4.3 versus the pH in rainwater is about 5.5. So it's a little bit more stringent than rainwater. And they found that the concentrations that came off of the turf did not approach current MCLs, the drinking water standards, or Method 1 standards, which are also drinking water standards. And the concentrations that may potentially leach off of the turf would be less than what you'd see from a residential septic system. So essentially less than, what kind of happens naturally with the exposures that are out ubiquitously currently. And so we concur with the conclusions of Tetra Tech, and we believe that the trace levels of PFAS identified in synthetic turf pose no significant risk to the field or the environment. Next slide, please.
Great, thank you, Marie. My name's Steve LaRosa. I also work with Weston and Sampson, and I'm a hydrogeologist and really specialize in evaluating contaminants in the environment and assessing what their fate and transport would be. And in the next couple of slides, I don't want to get too deep into science and really small numbers and all, but I wanted to just show this table, which it shows the first 3 columns or 4 columns there show the individual PFAS that Massachusetts actually regulates in drinking water. And then the 3 components of your turf system that have been proposed, which is the actual grass turf, the infill materials between those grass blades, which is basically a ground up Georgia Southern pine. So it's a natural material. And then the Brock shock pad, this is a kind of a dense polyethylene style or polypropylene pad that helps absorb some of the harder shocks that would happen out there during play. And then there are the 2 middle columns are actually results from soils that were collected from your 2 existing fields where the synthetic fields are being proposed. And then the 3rd to last column is actually from a study that was done in Vermont of background concentrations of these PFAS in soil. And that background study was done in places where there were not known or suspected sources of PFAS. They were in the Green Mountain National Forests. They were in lots of places in the Northeast Kingdom, trying to get a sense of what is a ubiquitous concentration for these PFAS. And then the last 2 columns are the state of Massachusetts concentrations for protection of groundwater and drinking water, and then for dermal contact. But what I just wanted to show you here was that we see non-detect concentrations for the 6 PFAS in the turf components, down to the 0.3, 0.4 part per billion concentration. So well below what the state's leaching potential concentrations are. All of those materials test well below that. You'll note that there are some estimated concentrations and some actual concentrations reported for the soils that currently exist at your fields. And the reported concentrations are for PFAS, which you may be familiar with from over at the airport and with some of the firefighting gear that you've been hearing about in the news, but also some of the other compounds are estimated in that 0.1 to 0.3 part per billion concentration. And that may be disconcerting at first that we're seeing these PFAS there, but that's why I put in this column about the Vermont background. What we see and what's being reported in the soils on your current fields are about what we would expect to see in any soils that you have out on the island, or frankly, any soils anywhere in the Northeast. So although there are concentrations there, they aren't elevated above what we would expect. The next slide, please. So even though we see these non-detect concentrations in the turf by this analysis method that's been used, there has been a lot of talk and there has been some data in the Nantucket study and in some other studies that have been done that indicate very, very low levels of PFAS might be released by turf over time. And so what we've been asked to do by the folks at SMRT and by the town is to come up with a monitoring program out at your fields. And this is actually kind of regardless of whether it's the turf area, the synthetic turf area, or the rebuilt natural grass areas. This is a monitoring program where we're trying to take a look at all of your existing infrastructure, where stormwater basins are, where drainage swales are, and collect soil samples prior to any reconstruction and install monitoring wells now down gradient of the existing and new fields that are proposed to be installed, and to collect data a couple of times before any construction, during the construction, and then after the construction, to really get a sense of what's there and what may be there in the future. And we're looking not just at PFAS, but also herbicides and pesticides, chloride and sodium associated with salt use in the winter, and the nitrogen series associated with the nutrients that you would add for enhancing growth. And as Tom Hanlon said, you know, there's quite a bit of fertilizer that's been applied to these fields over the years, and grub control. So we've tried to design this program not only to look at the artificial turf, but at any of the impacts that this redevelopment might have on that vital soil source aquifer that you have out there on the island. And
Thanks.
And that's
Thanks,
it for me.
Steve.
The next slide.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, again, the intent of the monitoring is just to establish a baseline and then obviously be able to monitor it. Just very briefly, the synthetic turf recycling updates are that the Danish company Rematch has signed contracts. Construction is starting on a synthetic turf recycling facility here in Pennsylvania. It is expected to be operational by Q1 of next year. Again, our turf, the Brock pad, and the organic infill, again, we are not proposing SBR rubber, but the organic infill, all three of these components would, in an estimated useful life of 12 to 15 years, we certainly are confident that we will have a manufacturer, a recycling option here in the States to address the repurposing of the turf. Next slide, please. Just lastly on project schedule, as we have talked to some of the contractors, I want to keep the board updated that we are looking at approaching the construction a little bit differently than we had presented, I think, to the board last time, where this summer we'll focus on some of the construction of the natural grass fields and tennis courts at Bacchus, but any construction and impact to the fields and track areas behind the high school will be held off until after the fall field hockey and football seasons, and then it will continue through the winter again with the completion of all improvements late spring of 23. Next slide. And that really concludes my part of it. I did want to introduce Dave Fredericks to provide some closing remarks.
Thank you, Dick. Thank you, everybody, for giving us this time. I'm going to focus on something, and I must admit, everyone has really talked about so many of the points that I was going to bring up, but I wanted to take a minute, and so I will truly keep this to about 2 or 3 minutes and talk a little bit about the planning process, because I think there's been some divisive conversation throughout our community, and that certainly is bothersome to us, and we don't think it's always that healthy for the community. So we'd like to kind of maybe get people to at least understand, for those watching and for you folks who have given us your time, to understand this has been a 10-year process. I've been in and out of it personally. I was trying to make a list one afternoon, and I come up with over almost 100 people that I've been involved with over the 10 years that I've been in or out of the various programs that have happened around planning the idea of this campus. And so it's a diverse group of people. In fact, when I look at the select board, I know of at least 2 people sitting there that at one time or another had been on 1 or 2 of these committees. It has been, to me, one of the better committees in that it's been an honest effort to try to take on a very complex set of issues that in fact affect all of our children. So as you think about that, one of the things that hit me was when I first got involved, there were goals that I think are still so applicable to everything we do today. And this group that's working on this phase of the master plan focused on them and talked about them. And so I wrote them down as I remember them, and some have been on different things that we've handed out. And they've changed a little, but they really haven't changed. You know, the goals have always been to provide a safe campus environment for our children. The goals have been to provide an order and structure to long-term planning, to provide the highest standard of what I call broad range of academic, athletic, and overall programs for every person and community member along with their children. This is one that I thought we all understood, but I do want to say it, is to value the benefit of one campus kind of environment for our children as they go through the various programs. And when people would come on these committees, I would always tell the same story every time. One of the joys I had raising my children here was one of my daughters could be playing sports at any one of the fields and any of my other kids or their friends. And at times they could come from the elementary school, from the middle school, or from a high school and go over and participate. Or when they were in elementary school and you wanted them to be excited about something at the high school, they could get there safely. And everything that's happened over the last 10 years has focused on those basic principles. And they were critical to everything that this particular phase went through. And I'm sure people are familiar with that, but I needed to say that. I think the other is it's an integrated plan. Tonight, you heard pieces of everything from a discussion about parking, which sounds simple, but the parking lot that we put in place is shaped a certain way that allows bus traffic to be improved, that allows pickup and drop off for our kids during the day to be improved, and our athletes after school to be able to still allow the children to come from the elementary school to walk to the fields. There are so many small decisions that people put their hearts and thoughts into to make sure that it was in the best interest. And similarly, I won't go down the path of all the debate over synthetic fields right now, but I do need to say, when you look around the fields, the thought and energy that went into the lighting so that we would have a safe and adequate program so that kids could play extended hours, and that athletes and even athletes that were visiting felt like they could play safely and get on a bus and not be rushed, or any of those types of issues, all became huge parts of the energy that went into doing this. The design of the bleachers, the location of the school. I could spend 2 hours with this group talking about the time and energy and thought that went into this integrated process, because for everything you moved, you affected something else. Why is a baseball field on the far right? To begin making space. But it has to do with as well, who would be using it and who would be safe on that side of the campus. There is not a detail that wasn't considered by this group. So I want to assure everybody the energy that was put into the discussion, even if you disagree with some of the things that we might recommend. One of the things that I would ask you to think about when you think about, synthetic fields is you look at the limited space we have with the goal in mind that we want to be on one campus. And I'm not saying there cannot be another solution. And certainly I think this committee will do whatever it needs to do to find the right answer for the community. But when you look at the volume of play, when you look at the extended hours, when you look at the growth that's happening, the synthetic fields that you see today changed from the ones that we had 10 years ago. But even over the 3 years that I've been on this committee, they have evolved several times, right down to the fill product underneath the grass, or the synthetic product. The synthetic product has changed. We've never stopped through the entire process looking for the best, safest answer, and repeatedly addressed and changed our plans to make sure that we had the best, right up to just a few months ago when we found yet another product that we had more comfort with related to the synthetic field, which is the one that you have in front of you. So just as you think about this, I'm not pushing what is the right answer. I am pushing for everybody to candidly be a little bit more thoughtful and guarded with the things that we say to each other. As a member of the committee, and knowing all of the members of the committee, people have put their hearts and thoughts into trying to do the right thing. And I would just ask us all to really pay attention to how we treat each other as we work through these complicated issues, and respect what's happened for the last 10 years, which has been a phenomenal amount of great planning. So thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, everyone, for that presentation. Select board members, if you're okay, I'd like to go to the public. A couple people had their hands up, and then we'll go back. If you have any questions, let's go to Dr. I think it's Kyla Bennett.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. And just so you know, my town has one of those campuses with all the schools at the same place, and it's great. I hope you are able to do that, because it's really, all of the benefits that were just mentioned are truly good benefits. I urge the entire select board to watch the meeting that the school committee hosted last night. I believe it is up on YouTube or available for you to watch. There were 6 PFAS experts there, myself included, 4 PhDs, 1 PhD candidate, and 1 master's in chemistry, and a lawyer, because I'm a lawyer as well. But we rebutted a lot of the information that Marie Rudiman and SMRT and Weston Sampson said tonight. Sorry, not SMRT. And one of the things that I just wanted to raise tonight is you need to think about the project specifications. I'm putting my lawyer hat on now. And basically, I was told that the specifications for the Nantucket turf field are the same as Martha's Vineyard. And those specs say that the synthetic turf vendor shall, a mandatory statement, provide a statement certifying that their products and manufacturing processes, including upstream suppliers, do not use any PFAS chemicals currently listed under US EPA's Method 537. And yet, Tetra Tech's analysis, which was a little bit misrepresented in the presentation today, but presented, they did find PFOA in the turf and the shock pad. They found PFHPA in the turf, the shock pad, and the Brockville, and they found PFHXA in the turf, the shock pad, and the Brockville. All three of those are on EPA's 537 list. So I do not believe that the synthetic turf you're looking at meets your project specifications. And I think this is a very critical point because we keep talking about the safety of the athletes, which is absolutely of utmost concern, but you also have to think about the safety of the island. You are on a sole source aquifer. And if you contaminate your aquifer with more PFAS, it's yours forever and you cannot get rid of it easily. Trust me, we have 2 artificial turf fields in our town, one of which Ms. Rudderman told us was safe. We are now paying $9.5 million for a filtration system because our water is over the Massachusetts MCL limit. So I do not think it meets the project specifications. And then I would be remiss if I just did not address a couple of minor points that were made today. Ms. Rudderman said that there is no significant risk from dermal exposure. She does not know that. There are no studies that say that. They are assuming that. It's a very, you shouldn't be making those statements unless you have evidence to back it up, and there is no evidence to back it up. Again, it's not just the athletes. We have to worry about your drinking water. And EPA just recently, in November of 2021, did a revised risk assessment of PFOA, which remember was found in the turf and the shock pad. And they said that the reference dose, which is the estimate of the daily exposure that humans can take without an appreciable risk of injury, is 0.006 parts per trillion. That is so tiny, we are heading towards a designation from EPA that there is no safe level of PFOA. So I had to point that out, number 2. And the last thing I want to say is, as we said last night, and again, I urge you to watch the school committee presentation because I thought it was useful. You should not be comparing Nantucket soils to Vermont soils. Everyone thinks of Vermont as very clean. That one study showing those Vermont soils, what you don't know is that EPA data shows that Vermont is the 4th biggest generator in the country of PFAS. Not to mention the fact that all of the PFAS from the ski wax, because PFAS is in ski wax, from all over Vermont is getting into their soils. So it is not an accurate comparison to Nantucket soils. You don't want to add more PFAS onto your island, especially with the sole source aquifer. It's dangerous for you. PFOA is a carcinogen. Your hero firefighters on the island have been adversely impacted by this, and it's really not fair to them or to anyone else on the island. And also, please just check those project specs because I think that the turf that you're looking at probably violates them. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Can we go to Emily Molden?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Emily Molden here with the Nantucket Land Council. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I want to just recognize first that there are obviously a variety of interests that have gone into this planning process, and certainly they all focus on the best interests of the students. The long-term management of these fields and playtime for the students, as we've heard, are obviously a big component of that. The Land Council hired the Horsley Witten Group to help us review a lot of the materials data, stormwater management plans, and some other relevant information that we received from the schools. And really our focus has been on water and potential impacts to our groundwater. The Horsley Witten Group represented the Martha's Vineyard Commission in reviewing the proposed turf fields over there. So they were very familiar with the issues as well as the Tetra Tech analysis of the materials that are being proposed to be used. Just a couple things I wanted to point out, recognizing that as was presented and in the Tetra Tech report, a lot of the results looking for PFAS in these materials showed values that are below these comparison values or the standards that the regulatory agencies use to assess risk. But something that I think is really important to keep in mind is that that is really just in consideration of these 6 particular compounds that we have standards for. The science is really still too young to do a complete evaluation of PFAS risk as far as its ability to leach into our groundwater, because there's still so much we don't know. But some of the analyses that were done relative to the possible leaching of these compounds and looking at what are called oxidizable precursors or substances that could break down in UV light to turn into PFAS compounds, as well as the presence of other substances that may actually be PFAS that we just don't have the science or technology to test for yet. And recognizing also, as Mr. Fredericks pointed out, that the technology around these materials is certainly changing. But at this point, the risk of potential PFAS contamination is simply unquantifiable as far as the little that we know about a lot of these chemicals. And it's a risk that the Land Council is not comfortable with in our wellhead contribution zone. There were some other concerns that we highlighted in a comment letter that I made available to the board, and the school committee and the schools will also be posting that on our website, and hopefully those will be addressed as well. Thanks so much.
Mr. Chairman, if I can respond, yes, we fully intend to respond to the Land Council letter that we received. That unfortunately we received it just 24 hours before last night. So we have people working on responses right now and fully intend to respond. We just haven't been able to complete that review yet.
Thank you. What I was getting ready to say is thank you, Emily, for that.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I did. There'll be time for everybody to respond. I did watch last night's meeting. I think everybody, all select board members should look at it. I did read Emily's, the Land Council's letter. And I think that was, you're right, it was given to us, Dick, to everybody a day or two ago. But that was circulated around. And yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. So I think we have another hand up, Deanne Atherton. And we'll go to select board members.
Thank you, Jason. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Deanne.
All right, just on another aspect of this proposal. First of all, as a grandparent of children in the Nantucket Public Schools, I'm thrilled with the work that has gone into this comprehensive plan. About 25 years ago, I was privileged to be the consultant who worked on the development of Nantucket Ice, which was then nothing but a rink of dreams that, because of the hard work of many community citizens, became a reality. And we now have a thriving skating program and hockey program. And at the time, we went to considerable time and energy and money to locate the rink within this campus setting. And our hope has always been that the children could walk to the rink, that the older children, the hockey teams, would have a rink that was so nearby. So my question is, when I look at the schematics that have been presented tonight, it's just very obvious that right in the center of it is the property that belongs to Nantucket Ice. So my question is, have the planners consulted with the board of Nantucket Ice to involve them in the long range plan for the development of this campus setting?
I'm happy to talk a little bit about that if through the chair, if that's all right.
Yeah, Dave, go ahead if you can answer that. Sure.
I think I would answer it this way. In the last phase, when we were doing the additional work at the elementary school, we approached them and talked about how we could share parking, talked about how we might look at some shared pathways. We looked at, other opportunities with them, and it happened to be a board at the time that was not interested in those conversations. And I'm not sure that where that board is today, but just 3 to 4 years ago, they were very focused on their own plans. So we didn't get very far down that path, although we had made several attempts to try to open that discussion.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. We'll go to Megan Perry. We'll try to wrap this up here soon with public comment and then try to get to some select board questions. Megan, go ahead.
Thank you, Jason. I'll be super quick. I've sent out a number of questions to the various boards, committees, commissions, and whatnot. So I won't repeat those questions. I would just look forward to them being answered. And I also wanted to echo that I think it's important everybody take a look at Land Council's letter in addition to the firefighters letter that also went out with regards to this. And it is just so important that everybody take a look at the workshop meeting that happened yesterday. Very informative. And we were so lucky to have the experts that we were able to have come and speak. So I would encourage everybody to take a look at all of those letters and all of those workshop meetings. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Megan. Go to Logan O'Connor.
Thank you, Jason. I just am going to make a comment as a parent and not wearing any other hat other than community member and parent. I have had a number of children in my fold since 2006 participate as 3-sport athletes. My husband and myself being very environmentally conscious, very focused on strong minds, strong bodies, the health and well-being of the students, the community, all of the people that make up this great island. This plan has been in place for such a long time. And as Dave Frederick said, with so much heart and soul, blood, sweat, tears to make this happen. And I think it's really interesting when you look at the percentage rates that are so high now of participation and have the possibility of being even higher if we can add, as Tom Hanlon said, track and field and things of that nature. In a time where everybody on this island is so flipped out about COVID and the pandemic, and when we lost 4 seasons of sport, and we see an increase of social emotional well-being, the SEL, which is a huge buzzword, and being able to help our students grow and be able to go off and experience all that they should as they move forward. I think that showing those percentage numbers and being able to support them and allow for this to happen is an absolute no-brainer. I don't know how it is that anybody could think that by not being able to provide these opportunities and to be able to sustain these programs, the programmatic hours play, a number of athletes, percentages, you can cite it in a million different ways. I think it's very short-sighted to say that this can't happen because of fields and what gets put there when we are clearly seeing how it's a benefit. And we have heard a lot of people talk about both sides, pro and con, for the synthetic turf fields and whether it's dangerous or not. There are all kinds of risks and all kinds of dangers in life. Sometimes you have to take the sides from both sides, weigh them out, and see how they're being, impactful in good ways or bad ways. And I think everything we have seen that has been even-handed, not slanted, has shown that this is not going to impact the water source, the water system, in the way that the people from yesterday's workshop and the way that the people who are uncomfortable about this are going forward. So I just hope people try to look at this in a more fair and balanced way and pay attention to that 72% and climbing percentage and how we can help our student athletes and those who are not student athletes by supporting what's the right thing to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Logan. Does the board have any questions? I know we could definitely talk about the turfs and the PFAS and environmental concerns for many hours. And I'm not trying to skirt that at all, but I also want to encourage any other questions on the overall master plan as well. Don, Matt, Christy, listen. Don?
First, at the risk of putting him on the spot, I'd really love to hear what Mark Willette's opinion is about risk to the aquifer. And then secondly, I've thought for a long time that we should consider going an extra step with this whole plan and enclosing a field into a building that could be used year round. And I would very much support bringing something like that to town meeting. It takes away the risk that is associated with potential water contamination and would provide an extreme service to the community. And I would be, as a taxpayer, willing to put in the extra money to get an enclosed facility.
Mark?
Thank you, Jason. Thank you for the question. We are currently reviewing all the data from both sides, including everything from last night, which was a very informative session. Appreciate that level of experts being involved with Nantucket's community and getting that type of information. What we need to remember is the existing conditions. There's PFAS already there. We had rain the other night all night. The soil samples taken that showed those levels with that rain moved down. I know last night there was some conversations about 1 + 1 = 2. Well, if it's already there and we replace it with something that has a little bit less, 1 + 1 still equals 2. I think the natural field and the artificial field both have potentials to get to our aquifer. Spending a lot of time today reviewing a lot of the information from last night, sending out emails and getting more information. And believe me, there is nobody more concerned about our aquifer than us over here at Wanna-Comet. So our due diligence is going to go into this. I'll be reaching out to quite a few more people around New England and around the country, getting as much information as we can before we make that decision. But stuff that's in the ground now is still working its way. So PFAS is a thing that's changing. The regulations are changing and will be changing, and we'll be adding more every year that we have to sample for. I was impressed with the availability of Weston and Sampson to meet with me and discuss the monitoring program that Steve went over. I think whether it's a turf field or whether it's a field of natural grass, we've got to remember fertilizers aren't great for the aquifer either. You know, I'm kind of happy this discussion is going on because for the first time in a long time, our aquifer is at the forefront of protection and people are talking about it. Believe me, there's a lot of things we worry about. PFAS is one of them. The amount of salt on the roads during snowstorms, fertilization, overwater use, nitrogen loading. It's all part of it. So, yeah, we're thinking real seriously about what can come off of these fields, whether it's grass or synthetic.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks, Don. That's a good question. Matt, you have your hand up?
Yeah, no, thank you, Jason. Yeah, first thing, I agree. I'm very happy at the planning that's been done there. It's amazing. People have put a lot of time in and a lot of effort. And I think, you know, as all of us that have done planning know, it's a process. And I think some of the things that are coming in now are, you know, attempts to, you know, some of it may improve it. So, you know, I hope both sides of this keep a open mind. I did watch the meeting and I thought it was very informative. And the one thing, sort of the one difference between PFAS and some other things like fertilizer, et cetera, is these are forever chemicals and they're additive. They never go away. And so I think we as a community have to remember that. They're going to be here. I think someone on the, yesterday said they're going to be here when our grandkids are still, here. They're not going anywhere. So we have to think about it from a sort of a different mindset than we have to think about nitrogen and some of the other issues we're dealing with. I think Well, my other comment I have to make, just not PFAS related, I'm just going to show my age. I was a coach. I enjoyed the field without being a running track away as a coach and as a, fans, et cetera. I think that's to the advantage. And I know we probably don't have any other option, but it saddens me to see, a field separating the fans and the main field. I'll remember it as Burnhamdale Field. So that's sort of sad to me. I guess it's progress, but it doesn't feel like it, but I know where we are. What I would like to see I would like to get some questions answered for the select board and for the school before we make comments on this in regards to PFAS. I would like a written opinion from town council as to what the impact on our multi-district litigation might be if we install these fields. And I'd like that in writing. I think that's more permanent and, it's something more we can count on. I was gonna, I'm glad Don asked the water company and asked Mark. That's on my list. I think we should get that as a written recommendation. It's okay. And I think we should get the Board of Health to weigh in and write what they, a recommendation and a analysis of what they feel the impacts are. We have those arms of the government that should be helping all of us to make the right decision. And, I think we should all have those to help inform our board, help inform the school committee, and help inform town meeting. I don't think, because if we go to town meeting without as much information as possible, it'll turn into a political situation. We have enough of those now. I would love to have, people with more knowledge than me come in and help us with this. So that's my thoughts. Thank you.
Matt, when you mean before select board comments, do you mean on the warrant when we put in our comments there? You want the water?
Yeah, if we're going to, yeah.
Board of Health. Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Anyone else? Melissa?
Thanks very much, Jason, and thanks to everyone who's presenting tonight. As many of you know, I was on the school committee from 2009 to 2018. So I understand somewhat intimately the commitment and dedication and long-term planning this process has had. And I think we're having a really great debate about the materials that are going to go on these two particular fields. And I think it's really important. I'm glad we're having this debate. I attended the workshop last night. I thought it was really informative, and I thought everybody was professional and just delivered great information. So thank you to the school committee for hosting that workshop. I want to just back up from the PFAS conversation for a second to talk about the plan itself, the development plan. And I think that in one of the slides where we talked about the implementation timeline, the two fields that have the potential for being turf right now, I was proposed, would not be implemented until the spring of 23. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, I can answer that. Melissa, the construction would start after the fall 22 playing season. So it would likely start in November. Again, that would all depend in coordination with Travis and the athletic program in terms of hopeful playoff games and that sort of thing. So, but it would be sometime likely in November, progressing through the winter for a spring 23 completion.
Okay. And I guess my follow-up question to that would be, is there an alternative way to phase this project so that the community can approve, a portion of, or if not the entire plan, with the contingency of product materials that will be used to be determined? I mean, I really would hate to see a delay in this campus-wide development plan. And I'm wondering if there's an alternative way to lay this out or to build this out so that we can do two things at once, get some of this done where we're not having a debate on materials and we know there are improvements, and where there is debate, we have some time to get some answers.
Yeah, I think the phasing in our minds, the most optimum phasing potential would be maybe a little more deliberate of what we're kind of thinking of right now. In other words, we move as forward as expeditiously as possible with Bacchus baseball and tennis, because that for two reasons there. It's a natural grass baseball field, so it gives us a little more time to evaluate the surfacing of the other two fields, but more importantly, from an athletic program perspective, there are no fields there now. So as we put a new field in play, we're not having to take it out of play and wait for 2 years for it to come back online. There's nothing from an athletic perspective, there's nothing online there. So certainly Bacchus baseball and tennis could be proceed accelerated as quickly as we can. It gets much more difficult when we work in the area with the two fields behind the high school. And the reason is that area has been designed and engineered as a single parcel. In other words, there's earthwork, there's utilities, there's a lot of other engineering that the two field sites are inextricably kind of tied together. So it's not something we could build just the track and not build the field closest to Sparks. It's very difficult to separate those two areas.
But it would be possible if we took those two areas and said, okay, and I'm not suggesting this is the answer, but as an example, we need another 6 to 8 months of study on the impact of the materials that are being recommended. And maybe we're looking at a spring 24 implementation of those fields. Do we risk anything by waiting another year to do that?
It certainly will cost more. How much, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I mean that I'm not sure what other risks would be associated with it. Okay. Only with the understanding that if it is, I won't say delayed, if it is pushed a year, we're going to be playing on those what we have out there now, which are not great playing conditions.
Yeah, my son graduated in 2020 and was a member of the football team. I remember some very muddy days.
Yeah.
I did want to just address a comment that Matt made about the Board of Health. We hopefully will be meeting in a similar fashion and having this presentation. I think it was requested at our last meeting. And Malcolm McNabb, our resident scientist, is really, I think, doing want some great information that we all do. And so we're looking forward to that conversation about the science and impact of the turf fields at the Board of Health and how it relates to public health risks. So I haven't seen the upcoming agenda, if that's happening this month or in March, but I know that we did talk about that. I just want to add a second comment that I do agree with Don. I think that having some kind of if we are going to need to pivot an indoor facility, and I guess it would be a question also, was that considered some kind of indoor facility that would eliminate the need for the risk of any synthetic turf field, and that could be a multi-use community building? Was that discussed at all?
It was briefly reviewed, yes, discussed with the committee. We looked actually at two areas, potentially the Melissa, the Sparks Avenue field, and also even the consideration at one point about could tennis be enclosed. And I won't speak for the committee, and Dave or Tom, maybe you want to jump in here, but I think the concern that the committee had was trying to be sensitive to the overall project cost and understanding that the needs of the town are many, and we want to be respectful of that.
I understand.
Can I jump in for a second, Chair?
Yep.
Jason?
Go ahead.
So I think Dick nailed the number one concern was we expected that price to potentially, depending on which building you were looking at, could be double. And the kind of numbers we're talking about today. When I was talking earlier, if you remember, Melissa, I mentioned that, we go through this very integrated planning process and trying to do the right thing, but understand everything's related. Your question about timing is actually a really great question, because it's a perfect example of good, and maybe that has gotten in the way of doing this in phases. We tried to do the base fields and the tennis courts and got really just, bids that made no sense. And so again, back to this integration, the integration even happened on the procurement side. We as a group spent a lot of time talking about how do you strategize to have a shot at coming up with a reasonable price. And it became to package more things together. And, again, if the community said we need more time and we're okay with spending a little bit more to do this in pieces, that may be something that has to be explored.
Well, thank you. And Jason, if I could just add one last ending comment. I think that it's something that's worth looking at. I would really hate to see all of this hard work and planning for, again, the larger scope of development of this campus and planning for these fields to fall by the wayside because we can't feel assured as a community about the materials going on these two fields. And I'm not 100% confident we're going to get the answers that we need before we go to town meeting to make the community feel, I want to say 100% safe about what our plans are. So I would encourage that thought, because I don't want to lose all the great thought and momentum that has gone into this planning for these great many years. So that's it for me right now. Thank you, Jason.
Thanks, Melissa. I would agree with you on kind of everything you said on not losing momentum on the overall project if we have to adapt and pivot and change some things. Any other, Christy?
Thank you. I was just going to say I agree with Melissa as well and Don on the indoor ideas. After watching last night's school committee meeting, there's both sides, people saying, yes, there could be an effect. No, there won't be. And I think the voters might err on the side of caution. So I think Melissa's approach of, kind of delaying those fields, being able to do more research, being able to have more conversations could help move this along without delaying kind of everything else that goes into this phase 9 plan. There's a lot of other sports and needs that are going to be fulfilled through this. And so if those could be addressed first as we answer some of those questions, that could be a win-win for our community. So trying to kind of not rush this and give it the time that it needs for the community to answer some of these questions could be a way to move it forward. So thank you, Melissa, for suggesting that.
Thank you, Christy. Any other last comments from Select Board? We have some other important agenda items tonight. I think we're good. No hands from the public. Thank you, everyone from the school. Thank you, everybody who raised their digital hand, attendees, and spoke. Appreciate it. There'll be a lot more discussion on this.
Thank you, folks. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Libby, I think we're good on that. I think we're on to, I see Greg coming on for the jetties and stuff next. I don't have the agenda in front of me all of a sudden.
Yep, I think Greg is ready to make something of a presentation here or a review of what the request is from the jetties concessionaire. It's quite thorough, and the jetties concessionaires are also here, and I believe their designer is available as well. Greg, go take it.
Thank you, Libby. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am helping to introduce this topic because I did assist
the facility manager and the Parks and Rec manager to put together this AIS, the agenda item summary. It's quite detailed, so Libby figured maybe I'd be the best person to walk you through. The Sandbar LLC, which is the licensed contractor with a lease agreement to operate the concession at Jetties Beach, is requesting permission to construct or have constructed a wooden roof over the two-sided deck along Jetties on their own dime. And with that comes a lot of legalese and an oversight. So when the Sandbar did approach the town, we did have them work with Charlie Pilecki and Paul Berard, and work with their designer, who is Val Oliver Designs, to make sure that the structure would not damage. The existing structure would be HTC approved, would also help, with the value of the property for the town. What comes next, their lease agreement does allow for them to seek this opportunity to do this. As you may recall, this time last year, actually February 10th last year, was first discussion regarding the awning that used to be on the two-sided deck at Jetties, which, although was wind rated, it did not stand the winds down there. And it was decided to have that structure removed per a select board vote before the next 5-year lease agreement was bid. So all the bidders would be on the same page, on the same playing field. The lease agreement does provide for the licensed concessionaire to seek approval to put up a shade structure at Jetties Beach, and this is what they are doing. So our little internal team, which should consist of facility manager, Parks and Recs manager, the director of municipal finance, and myself, did review the request, and we did summarize it in the AIS before you. It is our recommendation, or at least staff recommendation through town administration, to allow the Sandbar to seek the necessary approvals through HTC, building, so forth, to get to the point of being able to put up to construct a porch roof as described. The AIS does include their lease agreement as well as designs from Val Oliver Design. And we also have the caveat that nothing will happen until we have an amendment to their current lease agreement signed before they even start any sort of construction. We did lay out some requirements that we feel would be required in the amendment, and that is in your AIS. And we also are waiting until this meeting in case the board had anything else they wish to put into an amendment agreement. And right now, John Giorgio from KP Law is reviewing what we've already put in, but we won't finish it until we hear from you. Libby, is there anything else you want me to I know that the concessionaire Sandbar are on. I believe Val Oliver is also on the Zoom. And so is Paul Berard and Charlie Palaki.
I think you've pretty much given a very good summary of what the agenda information sheet contains, which again is very comprehensive, and I think we're happy to answer questions.
Any questions or thoughts from board members? Matt?
Yeah, has this plan been sort of run by HDC or the Historic Structure Advisory Board? Have they signed off on this yet?
No, Matt. This meeting is to give them permission to do that. We didn't want the Sandbar to seek anything without permission from the board first.
Right. Yeah. And the follow up, if I can, Jason.
Sure.
That's a great way to do it, Greg. I think it's a Peabody and Stearns building. It's it's important, and so we want to make sure that what I don't want to do is have us say that, I don't think our discussion tonight should be approving the plans that are in there, because that's not our purview. We're not any good at that. I don't pretend to be, let's let the preservationists do that. But, I think it's great that they're looking to do this, and I think, it's sort of, one thing that did come up sort of separate, but one of the things that came up when we talked about this a year ago was the Historical Commission had offered to do preservation planning for historic town buildings. So this is one that, I still think that if they've offered to do it and are willing to do it, I hope they're able to do that. And I think, I looked at this, I've grown up down there. I would love to see, I see that there are plans now, and I don't think this is in the cards, but I could see the left side of this being an open, sort of alongside the parking lot. There used to be, the Cahoons used to have a summer camp there, and it was one of the old beach houses. I'd love to see it be there with no sides, but mimic the buildings that were down there. And then the kitchen addition be in the rear eventually of that building, because then they could access that new porch on the left side of the building, and they'd have a lot more capacity, but they could also open up the takeout and people could go back inside the building. So I think long-term, we've talked about this, long-term, I think the place could be phenomenal. But, for right now, if there's a way to do it, that the, historic advisory signs off on, HCC signs off on, I think we should support it.
Melissa?
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Jason. I guess a question through you would be, are you looking for a motion to approve letting them start this design process? And okay, so that would be my motion, would be to let Sandbar LLC move forward with design. And I would hope that, before anything's built, it can come back to us so we can see what's going on.
So we also are looking for an amendment to the lease. Greg, are we
okay?
Not.
So we have, I'm sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, we have a draft that has been constructed by the Director of Municipal Finance that is with KP Law, but we waited until this meeting in case the select board had any additional items or restrictions to be added to the amendment. But what would happen is that amendment to the lease agreement would have to come back before the board if it gets through HDC and building and everything for final approval.
Great. So we don't need a motion on that tonight. We could talk about my motion and then see if there needs to be any amendment or comments on to the amendment to the lease.
That's my understanding, correct?
Okay.
So is this a motion just to approve?
To allow them, yes, to move this process forward.
I'll second that.
Oh, I seconded it already.
Okay. You're so fast, didn't even know. All those in favor by roll call: Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Don Holgate,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Christy Farentella,
Aye.
Jason Bridges, aye. That passes unanimously. Thank you, Greg, for the agenda item summary. It was really thorough and easy to understand and made this go really fast. Thank you.
And thank you to Sandbar too for taking a lead on this. It's great.
Yeah, thank you, George. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate your help on this.
Okay, next is an employee recruitment, retention, and position vacancy update. This is something that was brought up by board members within the last month or so, as we have been experiencing growing concern as to various vacancies throughout town government. And so we asked our HR director, Amanda Perry, to prepare you a presentation which could perhaps be given to you fairly regularly. And we hope that it will provide the information that you are seeking about these things, including recruitment and retention efforts and where we are currently with vacancies. And the vacancies, while a high number, do contain some new positions that obviously, they were just recently budgeted, so they haven't even been filled yet, but they are vacancies. So I think we would like Amanda to take us through and see if this is what you all are looking for.
Thank you, Libby, and thank you to the board for having me present this evening. I'll start off with some recruitment data. So the town of Nantucket has approximately 450 permanent full-time and part-time staff for the town. That includes enterprise funds, but it does not include the public school or the community school. From July 2019 till present, the HR department has tracked approximately 245 positions, and we've managed the recruitment of those positions. When I say manage the recruitment, that means we look at data from the date an employee leaves, or even the date that we think or we know that someone is leaving, to the date we're able to refill that position and hire another employee. We look at the classification of each position when there's turnover, the person who had the position prior to that, and their job description review. We look at the number of times it took to post a position and to ultimately fill it, and the number of applicants for each vacancy that we post. In 2015, there was a study done of the Human Resources Department and our services that we provide the community. And it was estimated that about 1,200 people per year we service. That could be job applicants, full-time employees, inactive employees, and Town of Nantucket alumni, also known as retirees. Next slide, Eric. In regards to our recruitment strategy, our desire to recruit and retain is not unique to the town of Nantucket. Municipalities across the Commonwealth are facing recruitment and hiring deficits, as well as the private sector. So this list here is just a summary of the things that we do to try to recruit and retain employees of the town. Social media, our public outreach manager manages our social media accounts. This is just an example of some of the things that she's recently posted. We have participated in career fairs, most recently virtually in collaboration with Mass Hire. We also send out industry-specific publications, and we have very specific job postings for, say, inspectors. We try to, or planners for the town. We try to reach out to very industry-specific job applicants. Our internal job alerts and word of mouth is also a very powerful tool for recruitment. The monthly newsletter. In this newsletter, we actually post a lot of the new hires of the town to share the people that we've actually onboarded into these vacancies. And for positions where we have significant difficulty filling, we do hire contracted executive recruiters. And the last option, career management systems. This is similar to a website called Handshake, where there's college students either in school or about to graduate that are looking for career advancement opportunities. Next slide. So some of the projects that we're working on related to retention and recruitment. The first is a compensation and classification study. So we recently contracted with the Siegel Company to initiate a comp and class study. The goal of this study is to review all of the job descriptions across the town, determine that we are maintaining internal equity with our pay practices, and also find external comparables to Nantucket. Succession planning. We recently engaged Raftelis, which is also the Novak group, to initiate this study. And this will be completed in fiscal 22. And also both of these studies are partially grant funded. We had a $50,000 grant split equally amongst these two studies. Collective bargaining. This is ongoing. Collective bargaining is important when it comes to recruitment and retention as well, especially when we're onboarding union employees. The HR webpage. So we are working with Florencia, the public outreach manager, to redesign the HR webpage to make it easier to share information. So there'll be essentially 3 buttons on our page, one for active employees, one for retirees, and one for applicants, so that we can make it really easy for the applicant to find the jobs that they're looking for and find more information about the culture of what it's like to work for the town. NeoGov, which I'll talk more about in a minute. This is an applicant tracking and onboarding software system that we recently are launching to help us to automate all of our processes in HR. And then employee housing initiatives. I don't know if Libby mentioned this briefly in the beginning, but employee housing is also a key factor in recruitment and retention of town employees. So a little bit about NeoGov. The NeoGov platform, again, will allow us to automate a lot of our internal processes, but also make it as easy as possible for someone to apply for a job with the town. So when they go on to apply on the town website, there'll be a link that'll bring them to this portal in NeoGov. And you'll be able to enter your information into an online application. It keeps track of that. So if there are other jobs you want to apply for in the town, it's easy to just use that same template. You won't have to retype everything. It also provides us tools related to DE&I, where we can try to initiate more of our strategic goals in eliminating unconscious bias in the recruitment process. Next slide. Another interesting factor in the NeoGov platform is the sharing the town culture. So what's really important when an applicant wants to work for the town is how do we share what it's like to already work for the town? So we are going to be able to upload videos from employee appreciation events, share information on the strategic plan, DEI initiatives, and also Government 101. Because I think a lot of our applicants don't even know yet what it's like to work for the town of Nantucket and what services the town of Nantucket provides the community. We'll also be able to share total compensation. So a lot of what we do in HR is we try to explain to new employees and new recruits that there's a total compensation package. There's the amount that you get paid, but there's also employer-sponsored plans such as health insurance that get factored into a total compensation package. And retention. So this is our ability to retain our qualified employees. Something that we do now is we recognize employees for years of service, from anywhere to 5 to 40 years. These are some pictures from our appreciation event, I think in 2018. We haven't had an in-person event in a couple years. The retirement pension, this is another thing that we try to explain to new employees and new hires that as an employee of the town, you're part of the pension system and not contributing to Social Security. The benefits package, 90% employer-sponsored health insurance. That's one of the big factors that are important to employees of the town. And also employment stability during economic volatility. So, the markets have changed. COVID has kind of disrupted a lot of the workforce, yet we are still here. We're still providing services to the community, and we still have all of our employees working through the town of Nantucket. And then the vacancy report. So I didn't want to go into detail on each of these positions. A lot of the information is on our website, but this is just a list of all the different positions that we currently have vacant across all town departments. Are there any questions?
Melissa?
Thank you so much, Amanda. This was really comprehensive, and I really appreciate all the information that you shared with us. I just wanted to ask you a question, if you can tell me a little bit more about the process of succession planning and what we expect the outcome of that planning to look like, and tell us.
Certainly. So with the Novak group, we are looking at primarily the department head and upper level management positions. We're meeting with each person who currently holds that position, reviewing the job description, and Julia will discuss their individual plans of duration of employment and successors for their current role, what is needed to be in that position that they're in, what kind of institutional knowledge do they have that the next person in line will need. And so we're really focusing on the upper level positions in this study.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And for some of the challenges in filling the vacancies, I'm sorry, Jason, I just had one more question. For some of the challenges in filling the vacancies, could you just highlight for us, 2 or 3 of the common themes you see in the challenges in recruitment and hiring?
Yes. Well, housing, I think that's number one. When we post a position, we have a diverse positions available, I should say, like from a laborer at the DPW to a planner to a building inspector to a manager of a significant enterprise fund. So there are a lot of different skills, education, expertise that we're looking for, and we want to make sure that our ads are reaching the broadest audience possible. So that's another challenge, is the housing, but also reaching all of the candidates and applicants that would be interested in working for the town.
Great. Thank you so much.
Can I just add one thing to what Amanda was just saying, because we had a discussion about this earlier today. Housing, yes, also cost of living here on the island. And that is something that our compensation and classification study that is upcoming that Amanda mentioned earlier is going to take into consideration. And there are formulas out there that we can run, different living necessities in comparison with other groups, and ours are, this is no surprise to people, are substantially higher.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Melissa. I really appreciate, and I like that we're putting focus on this and resources. I know Libby and Amanda, you have been doing this for a while, but bringing it to Wednesday nights, an open session, and talking about it, I think is really important, because we obviously have a housing crisis, cost of living, major challenges, along with the great resignation, right? People, the great rethink, whatever you want to label it. And it's a triple whammy that not every community has at our level. So I think whether it's next geo, I can't remember the software, but those type of things. I like the total compensation really explaining people of with 401k and health insurance and everything that comes in is really important for people to understand. And I think the state average for insurance and premium is 78%, and we're 90-10, which is one of the best in the state. I think that's a really big plus for retaining people. And other question is, have you found success on Indeed and ZipRecruiter and those models?
We use them, but I would say we haven't had a lot of success with them. Word of mouth, our current employees, they're our best resource. Right. When we send them our job postings, they know first about the job that we're posting. So they're very good at explaining to potential applicants what they would be doing in the job. And if they're passionate what they do, they say, come work for the town. And that's our biggest outreach.
Thank you. Matt?
Yeah, I want to thank you as well, Amanda. That was really well done. I find the same thing as something natural, word of mouth. Some of those handshake and some of that stuff, you go through a lot of applications for not a lot of success. But I think some of the things you're doing is good. And I think department heads, when they come up and do their budgets, that's an opportunity to say, hey, we're still looking for X and Y and Z, and we're advertising in these places and we still need it. I just think the word, as much as we can get the word out, is positive. It's will help. And the other part is, with the pension, the amount of people are paid plus the pension, they are at a very good rate of pay. When you look at that, the amount of money you would have to equal a lot of what the town pays would be substantial. It's similar to what a lawyer on Nantucket makes. And I think people don't recognize that. So, I think I think what you're doing, Amanda, is starting to change that. And I think that is great.
Thank you.
Christy?
Thank you. I just first wanted to thank Amanda for going through this. It was really helpful to see how many jobs we've been able to fill, especially during the pandemic, given kind of the challenges that the rest of the country has seen. And it just kind of reminded me that in 2020, when we attended the Mass Municipal Association workshops right before COVID hit, they had showed, there's a couple of videos where they talked about how to recruit. Different towns had created videos where they had current employees talking about kind of why they love working for their town or what their position does. And just going through this kind of made me think about, how do we do some of those testimonials of current staff. And what I liked recently is I've seen in our town, the newsletter from Libby every month kind of showcases an employee and kind of doing things like that, maybe on the radio, just things that kind of get current employees to talk about, why they enjoy working for the town and how they could recruit other people to do so. But thank you for all of this. I think, again, it's really great that we were able to recruit during COVID and maintain employees.
Thank you, Christy. Any other thoughts or comments, questions? Christy, was there anybody else with you that wanted to say something? I thought I heard somebody.
Just a little bit.
Okay, thank you, Amanda, for all you're doing. Thank you. Thank you, Libby. That was great.
Thanks, Amanda. She did all the work. You just have the one item under, unless there's committee reports, under the select board's reports and comments, it relates to the election warrant for May 10th. And I'll just maybe quickly explain it. There was a warrant article, Article 96 at the 2021 annual town meeting that related to, there was a charter change. It relates to the timing of mailing the town meeting warrant to voters, and it was approved by town meeting. However, in order for it to take effect, it requires the approval of voters at the next election. And the ballot question, I'm pretty sure I had it on the election warrant early on, but I think I mistakenly deleted it and then I completely forgot about it. However, I did recall it the day we were advertising. So, but luckily it's not too late to revise the election warrant to add it to the ballot. And if the board would adopt the revised election warrant, it'll be published in the newspaper and also needs to be mailed to voters anyway. And we'll put that in the warrant booklet that goes out with the article motions in it prior to town meeting. And we believe it will in fact be at least 14 days prior to town meeting, and even though that's not technically required yet.
Any thoughts? Questions? Do you need a motion for this, Libby? To put?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Is there a motion or a thought to adopt this?
Motion to adopt.
Yeah, second.
And all those in favor, Melissa?
Aye.
Dawn?
So, aye.
Matt?
Aye.
Christy?
Aye.
Jason, aye. That passes. Any committee reports or comments? Matt?
NPDC met yesterday for about 4.5 hours, went through, and yeah, it was painful, Jason. But it was, we went about 4.5 hours, went through items that were and voted on whether they were planning concern and voted support or not support. Most of it was, in favor of the, although there were a couple, as you would guess, that were, people had differing opinions. But overall, it was, sort of, so that's what we did yesterday. I could talk about it, but we'll talk about it later. Crack met Tuesday, and trying to think what the main thing there was, so Crack is still meeting and making recommendations and looking over it. What we talked about was whether to do the NOAA as the high tide or whether to do the Massachusetts has its own that's more granular at a better scale. But I think, we're going to come with a recommendation on how to handle that coming forward.
Thank you, Matt. Melissa?
I was just going to say that I finally got through the 4-hour planning board meeting on YouTube, and I think I'm almost 2 hours into the NP and EDC meeting. And I just want to thank those committee members for substantive conversation and debate and public comment that was allowed. They're clearly long meetings because there's a lot to debate and talk about, and I've really appreciated the conversation and commitment to keeping everything as friendly as possible. So thank you to everybody.
Thank you, Melissa. Just a couple quick updates. We're coming up on a future select board agenda, we'll be looking at the future hybrid of our meetings and others and what it'll take with NCTV 18 and some cost, and looking to try to go back in person in mid-March, maybe March 16th. But that'll be on a select board agenda here coming up soon. And I think we're also going to try to bring in our state reps to come in and talk about different legislation, just a legislative update for the state in the near future. There's a couple of things that we're going to try to bring up future agenda items just to put on everybody's radar. Anything else, Melissa?
I guess that begs the question of when do we expect that we will go back to a hybrid format? Are we thinking by the first?
March 16th.
March 16th. Okay, I'm sorry, I missed that.
Well, it's kind of like that's our Libby and I just talked about. Let's have a goal.
Okay.
But then we'll talk about hybrid for all meetings. Like how many meetings can be hybrid? What other equipment do we need to have? And
yeah,
might need to be phased out. That kind of thing.
Yep. Fabulous. Thank you. Do you need a motion to adjourn if there's no more comments?
Looks like it. Yep.
I'd be happy to.
So was that a second from you, Don? Okay. All right. All those in favor, Melissa?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Matt?
Aye.
Christy?
Aye.
Jason, aye. We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.